Today, the last Forensic Services Committee meeting of 2022, to explain to our visitors and to people tuning in to observe this. This is an additional meeting. It's over and above the quarterly meetings we have. And this is to allow the committee to focus on strategic issues. It ensures that our quarterly meetings aren't overcrowded with strategic issues that then crowd out our opportunity to scrutinise quarterly performance. So as such, there's no quarterly performance report at this meeting. And similarly, the director reports quarterly to the committee, and there's no director's report at this meeting because it's a particular special one-off. So we have apologies from ACC Malcolm Graham. Colette, do we have any other apologies?
No further apologies, Chair.
No further apologies. Excellent. Do we have any declarations of interest? Anything anyone wishes to declare that is not in the register or even is in the register? No? Excellent. Thank you. If I then move on to any other business, I don't think there is any other business at this stage additional to those items in the agenda. We do have to take a decision though on items 7 to 10 to discuss those in private. So can we agree to that? Okay, not seeing any dissent there. That then moves us on to the minutes and the actions from the previous meetings. So the first minute up we have is the minute of the committee held on the 24th of October. That's there to be approved. Can we agree those then as a correct record and approve them? Okay, that's them approved, thank you. That moves us then on into the action log and matters arising, which is item 2.2. Now there are 2 items proposed for closure and there are 5 items proposed as ongoing. So if you bear with me while I just get to that action log. So the first one is FSC 001, digital forensics next step, timeline for progression. That's proposed for closing. Fiona, is there anything you want to add to this?
No, thank you, Chair. I think this is a Police Scotland paper that they'll be presenting later on in the agenda. Right,
so it's on the agenda anyway. So can we agree to close that? The second is the performance report, and again, that is you, Fiona. That's proposed for ongoing, and it's got a closure date to the 23rd of April. There's another one, performance report again, which is ongoing, which again is coming up on the 23rd of April. The change programme update. Joanna Tierney, ensure that the risk is given some consideration when doing prioritisation. We kind of do risk, so that is being proposed. We speak about risk a lot of the time. So is this included now in the risk register properly?
Yes, Chair, it is included in the risk register, and also as we develop the revised planning for implementation on the back of confirmation of the budget, then we'll be discussing risks in and around the decisions as to the areas for progression. So that will be inbuilt into the prioritisation moving forward.
Okay, so that's proposed for closing. Regulators Code of Practice, that's to provide us with a briefing that brings together activity and legislation. So that's still open, Fiona, and we're going to get one, a proper agenda item at the February 23rd committee. So
yes, so we had the update on the Code of Practice in the last meeting, and this was an action that arose on the back of that to provide the committee members with a greater clarity around the relatively complex landscape of different bodies and their responsibilities, including the role of the forensic science regulator. So that will come to the next meeting.
Super. The next one we have is biometrics landscape governance update. Now that's got an end date of February 2022. Is that correct, or should it be 2023?
There was a paper that was provided to members in August. It should be 2023. However, what I would say is the timescales around closure of the particular item which that action relates to are outside of forensic services control. They relate to changes that are required in England on the PNC. So we're a little bit behest to the prioritisation of other demands on PNC with regards to completion of that activity. So I'm not confident it will be closed by February 2023.
Okay, but let's firstly note it's February 2023 that we're looking at. So fingers crossed that it will be, but we'll see. As you say, it's out with our control. Okay, the next one is Forensic Service Performance Report Q4, and that's to explore opportunities with benchmarking. And that's August 2022. So we're a wee bit behind on that. So we've got the performance framework that's being worked up. So should that now be February 2023 or March 2023 as an endpoint for that, do you think?
I think realistically it'll be incorporated into the April performance report. So once we finalise the new performance framework for the next financial year, then we'll include benchmarking as part of our reporting. So the early discussions we're having with the Met Police with regards to how we can bring some benchmarking into that. But there are other areas as well. So that's part of the performance framework discussions and something I would hope to have in place for next financial year.
Great, thanks. Okay, any other questions on these from board members? Okay, if we can note these, close off the ones that we've closed and fine tune the delivery dates for the other ones. So that's great. Just before we move on to the next item, I've just got a note telling me that Fiona McQueen is delayed in joining us, but she hopes to join us as soon as she can. So not an apology, but apology for being late, I think is how I would put it. Okay, super. Moving on then to, if you bear with me as I dance between my various notes. So we've got the action logs and matters arising. Decisions since the last meeting. Have there been anything, delegated decisions, etc., Fiona, that you need to draw to our attention since the last meeting of the committee?
No, I don't believe so, Chair.
It's fine. Great. Okay, that then moves us on to performance framework development, which is item 3, and I believe that's Vicky Morton that will be speaking to us. So Vicky, over to you.
Great, thank you, Chair. As everyone knows, Forensic Services are currently developing our performance framework, which is of course a tool designed to ensure our approach to decision making, managing performance is very much outcome focused, but also flexible and is a forward thinking approach, especially when there's new and emerging issues are considered. And I think at this point it's obviously worth just reflecting on the financial situation, and obviously this is a really good time for us to take this work forward. So we're currently in the process of translating our own forensic services strategy, which was approved in 2021, into measures which very much align with the Scottish Government's justice outcomes and also the strategic aims of Police Scotland, COPFS and PERC. So that work has very much commenced. And again, what we're really hoping this document will do is demonstrate that value that forensic services can bring and does bring to the criminal justice system overall. And the outcomes is very much outcomes focused. So in terms of our approach, we are engaging with SP strategy and performance, and we're taking this forward. We've had one workshop already internally, and the approach that we have outlined here in the paper is that we'll have a series of internal workshops to really focus on the measures we want to address in this document, ensure that aligns with everything that I've already mentioned there, and then we wish to follow up through follow-up engagements with our external partners, particularly through the SPA board and with SPA members, SPA corporate members as well, to really refine and develop the framework further. So in terms of timescales, we are looking at these workshops commencing, well, they've already commenced, but continuing into December and January, and then bringing forward the draft Forensic Services Performance Framework to the committee in April 2023, as has already been mentioned. Subsequent to that, the approach would be that we would take that to the SPA board in Q1 of 23-24. So that's an outline position of where we are in terms of the development, and more than happy to take any questions.
Right, so the committee would be the March 2023 committee that would agree it, and then you would start using these from April going onwards. No, this is really a flag planted to publicly state this is what we're doing. We have, I think, a workshop for board members' involvement in this, that is to say committee member involvement in this for mid-January, if my memory serves me right. Can I just ask at this point, I'm interested in the involvement of SPA performance staff, because I think there's a lot of really good knowledge there. Externally, are you looking at other organisations and how they do their performance markers? Because I'm conscious that I've never liked reinventing the wheel, and if someone else has got good practice, I made a career out of ripping off other people's good practice, and I hope to do that going forward, and doing it better than them. So are you looking to other external bodies to see how they do it?
Yes, absolutely, Chair, and that's where Amanda and our team who've been assisting with this work really come in to assist us with that. I think the other thing is to make sure that it aligns very much heavily with our partners and performance framework, and obviously Police Scotland have done a considerable amount of work on theirs, and we want to make sure there is that alignment right up to Scottish Government and justice outcome level.
That sounds great. Amanda, is there anything you want to add at this stage?
Just to confirm, Chair, that benchmarking ask that you've mentioned is very much part of the model that we're using.
Great.
So looking at other arrangements with oversight bodies as well in terms of the reporting of forensic services. So the session in January, I think, will be a really helpful discussion about everything that we've learned and how we use that to inform the framework.
Excellent. And can I also just ask, I really ought to know this, but how wide is the scope of this framework? Will it go right down into, I mean, obviously there'll be a strategic element for KPIs and was it called outcome indicators, etc. for this committee, but will this go right down into the core of the organisation and to operational performance markers as well, that for management to use as a tool?
Yes, that's right, Chair. In terms of our strategic, our strategy for forensic services and the strategic outcomes there, the objectives aligned with those outcomes, and then obviously we will build in the measures, the benchmarking, and how we will report that, has already been mentioned by Amanda. I see there's quite a few hands up there. Want to come in?
There are now, but what I'm going to do is I was going to say, oh, Jane's taking her hand down, but Fiona, I'll get you to come in first, then Amanda, and then I'll maybe come back to you, Jane, if you still want to.
Yeah, just to confirm, Chair, that the performance framework that we're looking at is initially we need to look at the external measures and the outcomes that forensic services provides, and particularly how we are contributing to keeping communities in Scotland safe, which is the real challenge and the importance around this piece of work in terms of how do we draw that line of the value that forensic science brings, the contribution that it makes, and then how that outcome is delivered, which is often through other partners which we're working with within the justice process. But underpinning all of that is a clear methodology within forensic services to translate those different measures that we have to ensure that we are delivering against the forensic services strategy. So we will have a core matrix that links in with each of the strategic objectives, which sets out for each part of forensic services expectations around performance. So there absolutely is a whole structure and framework within forensic services already that looks at performance measurement and management. And a real focus within the organisation at improving focus on performance. And I think really this is the part that needs to glue onto that really starts to translate the excellent work that happens in forensic services into meaningful external outcomes that are then fully aligned within the justice system, as Vicky describes. So it's a really important piece of work, and looking forward to engaging with members of the committee on the 19th of January in the workshop.
Great, thanks. Amanda.
Yep, just building on what Fiona and Vicky have said, Chair, we're very much looking to develop a performance framework that has a hierarchy in terms of reporting. So recognising those metrics which evidence delivery of the strategic outcomes sitting at the highest level, but all of the disaggregated data that Fiona's just described that sits below that. What we don't want to do is report so much performance information and management information to committee that you don't see the real outcome delivery. So it will very much be a hierarchy with information sitting below that, the level that's reported through the framework.
Great, thanks very much for that. Jane, did you want to come in still?
I think I will, but just to observe that a number of those points weave together, and I think I'm particularly keen, as you would anticipate, that it relates to the regulatory landscape, and that I think was a feature of the earlier and Fiona has picked up on the point, she's quite right. The issue around value and the outcomes within the justice system actually segues very neatly onto the next item on the agenda. So I'm content, and I think the next item on the agenda is particularly useful and interesting, actually.
Yes, well, I was going to say this does move us nicely onto that. So we have no other comments or questions from board members. Can I suggest then we're invited to discuss the content of the paper, which we've done, and suggest an approach to the development framework? Well, we've got the workshop in place, and so I would suggest we note this and we move on to the next item, which is, excuse me, demonstrating value, I think, of forensic services, which is a verbal report, verbal update from Fiona, from the director. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So in the last meeting of the committee, or in fact, I think it was the August meeting, we discussed the working group and the outcomes of the initial discussions from that group, which has been set up really to look at the how we can assess the value of forensic science. And the first meeting of the group happened in May, and we had the second meeting of that group just earlier this week, hence why we have a verbal update today as opposed to a written paper. So in the May meeting of the working group, we had a broad discussion around how we would go about doing this exercise and where we needed to focus in and amongst a number of other more conceptual discussions. The outcome of that being a real willingness and buy-in from all of the different members of the working group to look at the value of forensic science. And within those initial discussions, particularly focusing in on an area so that we can get a practical outcome out of any work that's done. Because it is such a broad area of forensic science, we need to focus in to make the work meaningful. And we had settled in that initial discussion on focusing on sexual crime, and in particular aligning that in with the strategic priorities around reducing violence against women and girls. So following on from that meeting, there has been discussions with various stakeholders, but in particular with the Leverhulme Institute at the University of Dundee and the director, Niamh McDade. And myself and Vicky had met with Niamh, and Niamh attended the second meeting of the working group just earlier this week. And Leverhulme are very keen to support this work and have prepared to fund the delivery of some research that will allow us to look at the triage points of the process, to look at the justice process, and they have done an awful lot of work at mapping out that end-to-end process already. And I think it's a really strong opportunity for us to build on the work that Leverhulme have been doing to focus it in on a particular area. And it may be broader than sexual crime by necessity, but I think certainly that focus on violence against women and girls is a key element of how we will progress the research in relation to the value of forensic science, particularly in the field of sexual offences and sexual crime. So there is an action for myself and Vicky Morton to discuss with Niamh McDade the content of the research that needs to happen. We have a commitment from Leverhulme to provide some funding to support that work. And then the next meeting of what will become the steering group now will happen in February to approve that with a view to launching the research study around the value of forensic science in relation to sexual crime and violence against women and girls in March of next year. There's still a discussion to be had around the overall timescale for completion of that piece of work, and there's a couple of different options there which we need to explore further with Leverhulme with regards to the type of research activity, and then by definition then how long that process will take, but it will be between 1 and 2 years for the research to be completed. But I'm really hopeful that this is going to provide a really solid outcome that's going to really allow an assessment of the value that forensic science can bring in this particular area of crime. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks very much for that. It's very comprehensive. Jane, did you want to add
Yes.
something at this stage, please?
Yes, I would. I chaired that meeting, and suppose I chair the steering group. It was a really valuable meeting. I must say, we've got real buy-in, and I see Police Scotland were represented, and Raymond was part of that meeting. It's really very helpful. Just for those who were, let's say, at the mental health seminar on Friday, by accident, if not by deep design, we have ended up with, as it were, the same multi-dimensional model of involving academics, professionals, and then the key constituency, as it were, that I think we need to build in, which is more difficult and more sensitive, but nevertheless need to, is the lived experience. And what is the experience of victims, families, suspects, that whole dimension, but actually the involvement, I think, of like Lever Hume, CIPA, that bit of distance, I think, will be helpful, and they will be able to help us make those contacts and take care in the sensitivities of how a project like this engages. It's easy enough in a sense to engage with the academics and the professionals, but the lived experience needs to be handled particularly sensitively. So no, I thought it was extremely valuable. I think having started off about 18 months, 2 years ago, when we first started this, very conceptual, very aimed at the professional community, I would say. We have shifted remarkably, and quite rightly, I think, to an external perspective. Our interest is in, it's for the public interest, the public confidence, the public benefit. And I think choosing a particular theme like this, sexual crimes and particularly violence against women and girls, but there are sexual crimes against men too, and men as suspects, but taking that constrains it and makes it practicable and meaningful. So I'm very positive about this. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much for that. Can I ask, you made reference to, Jane, you made reference to making it wider. So Fiona, have there been, I'm assuming that SPA comms have been involved or will be involved going forward with a view to broadening out the exposure for this in due course, at appropriate times, of course.
We have communications involved in the working group from the Forensic Services Communications and Engagement Lead. So we do have communications represented within that working group, yes.
Right, and do they tie in with the SPA?
They will, yes.
Right,
yes.
Good, because it's one body. Okay, do we have any questions? Jane, you've still got your hand up. I'm assuming that's a legacy. So, yeah. Any questions from anyone? Okay. No, I think this sounds like a very worthwhile project. And I mean, when you see the title value of forensic, you kind of think it's a no-brainer. Why would we need to demonstrate this? Because it's kind of pretty obvious, but actually with these things, it's a drip. You continually have to remind the public of your importance in order, particularly when you're competing for resources with other bodies. It's very important that people understand the importance of forensics and in the justice system and in helping keeping us safe going forward. So we'll be interested to see this coming back. Will we need a report back on this, a formal report at some point? Would that be in March or would that be in 2 years' time?
Chair, I think we'll have a written report for the April meeting, and then probably another verbal update in the February committee
April meeting being the March meeting, because we don't have a meeting in April.
Do we not? Oh,
No,
apologies. We have one on the 1st of February, and then I'm not sure the next one, Colette.
The next one's the 8th of May.
8th of May. Okay. So the working group will meet again in February. and there will be a launch event. At the moment, the timescale's looking like March. So I'm keen that there will be a further update to the committee before the launch event, and then a formal written report on how things are progressing, what the timeline looks like, what the project plan looks like for completion of the activity, which is likely to follow in more detail than in the May meeting. Apologies.
Grand. No, apologies, because I've been waffling on about March meetings, and of course I've got the March meeting of the board in my head. So, but I do know we don't have one in April. So, so yeah, early May. Great. Sorry for freaking out board members here who are now panicking over their diaries, but welcome to my world. Okay, Raymond, you had your hand up. Did you want to come in? Or your pen and waving your pen in the air?
No, apologies, nothing nothing
Right.
meant by that gesture.
Never go to an auction sale. Okay, can I suggest then, if we note the demonstrating value, we'll have something up to the meeting either in February or May, and that moves us then on to digital forensics next steps. So item 5, and oops, that is CS Conrad Trickett. So welcome, Chief Superintendent Trickett. I'm assuming CS stands for Chief Superintendent.
It does, Chair.
Great. My
You.
first year as Chair of Community Safety, I managed to demote a very senior officer and promote someone above him within the space of 30 seconds. So
I'm not too precious about the rank, so
well,
but
on
thank
our
you.
mental health seminar last week, everyone was getting Queen's Police medals as well, so by accident. So anyway, over to you, Chief Superintendent.
I'm not sure I'll ever get one of those, but probably just by way of introduction, Conrad Trickett. I'm currently the Divisional Commander in N Division for Police Scotland in Highland and Islands. Despite the sunshine coming through the window behind, we do have a major incident for the severe weather that's ongoing at the moment. So that's my day job at the moment. Very much looking forward to moving across to Policing in a Digital World programme as the business lead. I won't start there until the end of January, unfortunately, so I can't get completely sort of into the detail of it until then. I know several of the members and staff on this call, so it's nice to see some familiar faces again, and I look forward to working with people going forward over the next period of time. So what I would say is that I can probably contribute quite a lot to the policing of that title, Policing in a Digital World, and I look forward to learning lots and lots about the digital world side of the programme. So that's a hint to my background. The paper is obviously there for reading and for discussion, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions, some of which I will try and answer, some of which I may need to come back to a future meeting and give you the detail and the assurance that you look for. The ISO journey that digital forensics is undertaking is obviously there for quality management of the work that is ongoing at the moment. And in 1.2, it details the sort of breakdown of the various areas that the ISO standard will cover. Our colleagues in Forensic Services has already been on this journey, and we're leaning into them and reaching into them in terms of some peer support in order to take us along the pathway we need to follow. The team and some of the sort of the expertise of the team has only been in place since June of this year, and my sense of it is that actually we've done a lot of planning the plan at this point, a lot of scoping work, a lot of discovery work, and to try and get a good understanding of where we are at the moment, the as-is position, and some of that's detailed in section 2. I think what we need to recognise is that as well as the quality improvement that we're looking for from the ISO accreditation, we're also going to drive national standardisation through this work. So as with all things in Police Scotland, we're on a journey from where we were nearly 10 years ago now to where we are now as a single organisation. And the as-is position, we shouldn't assume that it will be the same in all of those 5 existing hubs. The custom and practice development will be different across all those locations, all those hubs with all those staff. And therefore, a key bit of achieving the ISO accreditation is also driving forward national consistency of standard and so forth, sharing best practice as you would expect, and so on. So what that means is that this is a big change for the digital forensics, and with change and with people, you need to provide yourself the space and capacity to do that properly. My understanding of the ISO process is that, and you'll see that in the timeline that I'll come on to shortly, you need to deliver the change within each of those hubs, and you need to then give it a soak period. So you need to embed the change so that people become used to that process, that particular practice, that standard, and then you bring in the accreditors to do the ISO accreditation. And that's why you'll see there's the pre-assessment, as it's called in the timeline, and then there's the actual accreditation and a time lag between them to embed the change that we're looking to embed as we go along the journey. So I think that I suppose I'm trying to explain some of the challenge of achieving this, which we'll face. There's a reference to focusing around mobile phones first of all, so just a little bit of detail under that. 80% of the examinations are mobile phone examinations, so it is the vast majority of the work that the digital forensics do. And because of the technology that we now all have in our pockets and our mobile phones, it can be disproportionately time consuming, even in terms of accessing the device as well. So we're going for the bulk of the demand in terms of doing the mobile phones first. And that probably takes us into the appendices and a bit of the time scale. In fact, sorry, just before I get there, obviously along this journey we might discover problems, and we only know what we know at the moment, and we know the as-is position, and therefore the timescales are indicative and target timescales. But what we can't, it's the unknown unknowns, isn't it, that we face in all these pieces of work. So it may be, and there's a reference, I think, in one of the sections in section 2 around buildings, for example. So that's been thrown in and probably might cause concern, but it's an example of we might get to a point along the journey where we realize there is something quite challenging that we need to overcome to achieve the accreditation in a particular site or a particular hub. And that will need us to reassess where we are timeline-wise and delivery-wise. So it'll have to be a live, a living timeline, and one that we keep under constant review, as you would expect, to both deliver as soon as we can, because that's the right thing to do, but also deliver the change appropriately so it's embedded, and also then if there's any hurdles that we need to overcome, we might need to bring them round in a different route so that we can overcome them. So the timelines are detailed. The first one is specifically around Muggy Moss in Aberdeen, which is where we're going to focus a lot of the. We're going to go there first, essentially, and look to gain accreditation there first. Obviously, when we work through a lot of the issues in Muggy Moss, then we'll start to be developing those national standards that I referred to. So that national standardization will happen collectively as we move forward. Obviously, once you start to bring in processes, you have to design that as the national process that's going to be put in place when you get to that stage. So that will start to paint the picture in more detail around what that will actually look like. But you can see the timeline there in terms of the detail of what needs to be done, and the assessment process, the pre-assessment process, and the accreditation itself. And that takes us effectively a financial year to achieve. And then if you go into the second appendice, you'll see a more detailed, sort of a longer term timeline with some of the other locations and key dates and so on. And obviously the timescale for accreditation can be compressed slightly in terms of, Muggy Moss will be lots of national processing and getting ourselves the first time we will have done it in terms of the actual process and actually understanding what this will look like for an organisation. Obviously, we should, in theory, get slicker as we move through that process, and some of the things will already been ticked off as we've done the earlier sites. But my caveat to that is, of course, what I said at the beginning, is that the as-is position, the starting point from not just an accreditation perspective, but also from a change capacity perspective, is different for each of the locations, and that depends on the people and the places that they've come from, and so forth. So it's a change journey. It's not just a tick box exercise, which maybe some people would think accreditation is. I think just touching on, and obviously I wasn't in the discussion last time, but there's a couple of things that were raised to me. So this very much deals with that national standardization and that quality management process that will ultimately be in place. There is, within the program of work of Policing in a Digital World, there is also a project called Digital Forensics Redesign. And what that project is looking at is the demand we face, the projected demand in the future, and what our service may have to change to become, or what the over the horizon picture might be. So whilst it's part of the same program and there's lots of interdependencies, if you like, it's got a slightly different focus. So I think there was some discussion last time around some of that future proofing of the work. I suppose there's an assurance to the board that that thinking and that work is also part of the program, but it's not the specific project of ISO accreditation. It's just very closely aligned, as you would imagine. And some of the discussion I think that will play out in that redesign work will probably get taken to the professional reference group that we've established between Police Scotland and the SPA that Caroline sits on from an SPA perspective, and some of the members of staff as well, and other people, so some of that discussion will also play out in a different arena, I suppose. I'm putting forward to the committee today. I believe there was a bit of discussion around sort of evidence and where are we with the evidence we present to courts and criminal proceedings whilst this journey goes on. Crown, we are engaged with Crown as part of this piece of work, and the Fiscal's office. As it stands at the moment, so they understand that we're on a journey to gain that ISO accreditation. As it stands at the moment, the individual members of staff are accredited to do the examinations that they do through the training that they receive on the equipment that they use. So there is the individual is accredited to carry out that examination through the training they receive, and therefore that is a credible evidence that they present to the court through that. So there's been the discussions that we've had so far, there's been no sort of concern or risk raised around the presentation of evidence in a court scenario, which I think was one of the concerns that was being discussed previously. So it's to provide some assurance around that, and I've double checked that with my detective superintendent colleagues who this is part of their day job, to make sure that that's in place, and we'll continue that engagement with the Fiscal Service throughout. I'll probably pause there because I think that's covered the points I was aware of, but absolutely happy to take any questions and either answer them or field them appropriately for future discussion.
Grand, thanks very much
Chair.
for that, Chief Super. Welcome firstly to Fiona McQueen. So thank you for joining us, Fiona.
Apologies, Chair, for being late.
You've missed a stellar meeting. The board members have been giving them a really hard time. So, right, got questions from, bear with me, I'm going to get this in order. Jane first, then Caroline.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Conrad, and good to see you again. I think from my perspective, that was extremely helpful. I had three things I wanted to come out from the last meeting: a clear understanding of the timeline in relation to accreditation, and to some extent, well, if not reprioritization, but why you've prioritized in the way you have. And I really welcome that. And I think we'll hope, insofar as we can, through our oversight of this process, we're holding your feet to the fire to that, but although it's really for Police Scotland management to hold your feet to the fire on delivery. It hasn't yet addressed, but that's fine. In due course, I'd like to see that read across to how it fits within the whole regulatory landscape. Because this committee is simply dealing with the accreditation. I'm going to defer to Caroline on some things, and I think I feel I should certainly defer to Ruth McQuaid on when you say individuals are accredited. Is it possible that you mean they are credible by virtue of the training they have undergone, or is it that there is accreditation in relation to individual bits of equipment? Now, as I say, Ruth and Fiona Douglas indeed may know that even better than you, but that's my question.
I might be able to get the answer to that whilst we're on the meeting, unless one of my colleagues does know the specifics of it. But I would need to check the nuance that you're providing there and come back to you, Jane.
Okay.
It's the evidential point, and I think Ruth would be would know, and or Fiona would know.
Fiona, can you shed any light on this?
I would think we're talking about the competence of individuals isn't under question, Conrad, with regards to the fact that they've been fully trained in the activities that they're undertaking, and they're using kit that's been appropriately validated for the purposes at which it's being used, and therefore, as that evidence is being presented to the court, the court can rely upon that and has relied upon that as professional evidence based on those factors. But I would think in terms of accreditation, that would be something that would be externally provided, presumably, and in the future through UCAS, as we've been discussing. But I'm not aware of that sort of external accreditation at this point. So I would think it's around the competencies and the confidence of the courts in the expert evidence that the digital investigators are providing to the court is accepted by the Crown. That would be my expectation. But Ruth McQuaid is on the call. I don't know if Ruth wants to come in.
It's not something I've been personally involved in these discussions, Conrad. Who is it you've been speaking to? I'm getting confused here because of different conversations and accreditation here. I've been more dealing with accreditation from the UCAS side, from the labs, and not from the police itself. So I can't really comment on who you've been speaking to.
But
you're on mute, Conrad.
Yeah, I would need to establish the name of who's been spoken to. It's colleagues that are part of the programme already, not myself personally.
Yeah, I apologise if I've set a hair running. I don't think I have. I mean, in fact, Fiona's response was my understanding, actually. There's a difference between the accreditation of individuals as opposed to the accreditation of a system. But we have credibility, I think, is the police have credibility is the critical issue.
Why don't we take this offline and see if we can get you a definitive answer on this? And Ruth, sorry, we weren't trying to ambush you or anything, so it's a bit unfair to...
It's not that it's really anything to do with me, to be honest.
So don't worry about it. But,
no, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't want to get up the nose of the Crown on this if I could possibly avoid it. So your valued partners. So Caroline.
Well, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Conrad. It's great to see you again, and looking forward to working with you on the Policing in a Digital World programme. It's great to have you on board again. And actually, my questions have been asked by everybody, so I'm content to just take that offline. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Do we have any other questions on this? Can I just ask, what happens if you don't get accreditation in 2026? Do you carry on as normal, or is it a catastrophe?
I mean, failure wasn't part of my expectation, if I'm being honest, Chair. Just to set myself up. It's a very good challenge. I think we will learn on the journey. where we may be falling down, and that might be one of the unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
So it may be that one of the hubs, for example, isn't actually a suitable environment or hasn't got the right equipment, and therefore won't be accredited until we get that in place. So I suppose my sense is that, I mean, I think we will achieve it. Where we don't achieve it, it'll be for a very specific reason that we'll be able to bring back to both the organisation and the board to say, actually, in this, and I think it'll be hub specific, I suspect, rather than across the whole network. So my sense would be that what you're pointing to there would be an unknown unknown that we're then going to have to navigate to work out.
Except it's a strategic risk and therefore not an unknown unknown. It's a known unknown. You know, we know that you can fail as well as succeed. So yeah, so I'm just flagging up. There is a strategic risk there. So I've got Fiona. You maybe want to come in. Sorry, Conrad, I'm waffling over you, but Fiona.
Yeah, if I could just come back on and just remind members of the discussion that we had at the last committee with regards to the forensic science regulator in England and Wales, and the new code of practice which will be laid before Parliament in January. So that new code of practice is not applicable in Scotland. However, you'll know that Forensic Services has always maintained the same level of standards through the codes of practice that the forensic science regulators had before the statutory powers were introduced. So the code will go live around about March time, and the regulator in England and Wales is keen to come up to Scotland, and myself and Conrad have had an initial discussion about making sure that both Forensic Services, Police Scotland and other stakeholders are around the table for that. But that's quite important because the regulators, in order to comply with the regulators' code of practice, it goes hand in hand with the ISO 17025 accreditation. So the same issue, I think, exists with digital as it does for the traditional forensic science, which we discussed in the last meeting, with regards to that perception of Scotland working to a different standard. So it is important that we work with the regulator so that we can demonstrate that we're working at that same level. So there will be a good discussion, hopefully early in February, with the regulator to talk about the new code of practice and how those timescales are being implemented around accreditation and compliance to that code in England and Wales.
Right. I'm going to get Conrad back in before I move on to you, Katharina, if that's okay. Sorry, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to try and I have got a little bit more in terms of the question around accreditation or credible, which I think is worth just highlighting the fact that it is credible would be the right word, based on almost all of them have honours degrees in computer forensics and have completed specific courses in the relevant software products that they're using. And in terms of the individuals within Crown Office, Procurator, Fiscal Services, and Andrew Richardson, Jennifer Hamilton, that are the monthly meetings are held with them, and they're our link into Crown Office and are happy with where we are at this point in time. So just to sort of provide the detail around that. Thank you,
Okay, that's very helpful. I'm used to working in the pharmaceutical industry where there would be a qualified person that signs off all the high-level documentation. So it's not quite the same as that, but I see where you're coming from. Katharina.
Yeah, thank you very much for the report, for the presentation. Really interesting topic. I'm sort of relatively new to this, and I think what I absolutely welcome is this, that as as has been mentioned, as part of this work, it's the end result will ultimately be a greater consistency across all the hubs in terms of the ways of working, etc., etc. And apologies if I've just not picked it up in the report, but I was wondering to what degree has an analysis been made as to what exactly the differences currently are, in the sense of, has there been a current state assessment? So do we have a visibility at this stage, as to what is the degree of uplift that will be required to sort of a more consistent standard? Or are we not going to get that until we are kind of, touch the individual hubs after the first one has been completed?
Thank you. So I think that discovery phase is ongoing at the moment. So we might be able to provide some visibility around that in future reports to the committee. But I think your second point is also valid, that it might also be further along that journey that we start to discover some inconsistencies that need that national standard approach. But I would hope that certainly by the end of the Aberdeen phase, that first accreditation, that we would have identified, we'll know the as-is position, and we also will have identified that best practice national standard that we want to drive forward through the rest of the hubs.
Great, thanks very much for that. Katharina, have you got anything else on this? No. There is, because we had a discussion about this before the meeting, about whether or not this is the right place for it, because we're really looking at the regulation of digital forensics rather than something that is forensics, the operation of forensic science. And my understanding, if Fiona Douglas, you'll be able to keep me right in this, is that it's here because we've got expertise in the lab with the process of this. Is that correct?
I think it's here, Chair, because of the review that was undertaken, which was led by the previous member of the Forensic Services Committee, Bob Hayes and Jane Ryder, where the review made a recommendation around the requirement for digital forensics to be accredited, and through the discussion on the back of those recommendations, the need for the Forensic Services Committee to keep oversight of that progress towards accreditation, and that was the decision made at this point, that it should come to this meeting. Right.
So, I mean, this would be an effectiveness discussion anyway. One of the things we could feed into that as whether this was the correct place for it or not. But at the moment, what would you be suggesting, Director? Would you suggest carrying on as normal, or is there somewhere better this should be looked at?
From my perspective, I think that there's value in the Forensic Services Committee members having oversight over this activity. Forensic Services will continue to support Police Scotland on what we know is a really difficult journey towards accreditation. And I think that we will continue to work very closely with colleagues to offer support and organisational learning that we have within Forensic Services. And Craig Donaghy, our Head of Quality, sorry, Craig, I know that's not your new job title, but it's such a mouthful. So I think that we'll continue to support colleagues, so that I think there is benefit in continuing to have the discussion. Clearly, a lot of the governance and oversight of delivery of accreditation for digital will happen within Police Scotland, and Forensic Services will not have a part to play within that.
Great, okay, thanks for that. Do we have any other comments or questions from board members? Okay, Conrad, thank you very much for joining us and updating us on this. Can we note this then? I'll just double check the recommendations to be, yeah, we're invited to discuss the content of the report. Well, we've discussed the content, we've had a good discussion about it. So if we can note that discussion, and we'll move on to the next agenda item, which, if I can get my notes up, is Forensic Toxicology Oversight Group. Oh joy, it's me. And just to say that the minute of this meeting has been circulated. We had, is it one meeting or two meetings? I'm just trying to check. Yeah, 24th of October subsequently, and then a minute of, yeah, thank you for helping me. Yeah.
We're moving on to item 6, which is an overview of the Forensic Toxicology Oversight Group.
Yes,
that's the last item of the that's the last item of the public session before we move on to the private session.
Yeah,
so that has
right. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So yeah, oversight group from the 1st of November, which has been circulated.
1st of November and 5th of December.
I'm back on track. Yeah, thanks for that. Which has been circulated, and it's just to flag up to members with Project Weaver now having been successfully completed, and congratulations to all involved with that, and with substantial progress made on drug driving. The oversight group took the decision we wanted it to be perhaps stood down with a view to a more direct reporting line to this committee going forward. And the board has subsequently agreed to that. So the minute has been circulated. Are there any questions for me on the minute? Nope. Okay, if we can note that then. And if there's nothing else in the public session, and we then stop the broadcast.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair.
Caroline.
Caroline's got a question.
Caroline, yes.
Thanks, Chair. And it's not really a question. It's more just to say, I think that project, special project team did a great job. And I just want to congratulate Fiona and all the team at Forensics for getting that project up and running on time and on budget. So I just want to say congratulations and well done. Thanks.
Yes, Jane.
No, mine was the same point. I didn't want the moment to pass without public recognition of an outstanding project. Thank you.
Yes, yes, great. And Fiona?
Just want to say, oh, sorry, which Fiona are you talking to, Paul?
Fiona McQueen, sorry. I'll come to Fiona Douglas in a second.
I will answer to McQueen if you can drop my first name. Thank you, Chair. The long-term sustainable model, do we have a sense of when that will kick in, or when we will be able to be confident that, so it's, I suppose, best and worst case scenarios of demand and flexibility within that? Do we have a sense of when that will settle?
Fiona Douglas, I will let answer that, and I would suspect what goes on tomorrow will have the major impact on it, but I'll not steal your thunder, Fiona.
Thank you for the question, Fiona. So the long-term sustainable model paper was put to Scottish Government in April. Since then, we've done a lot of work on putting a framework in place for further outsourcing. So we're currently updating that document with the revised costs for outsourcing, given the new framework. That will go back to Scottish Government before Christmas, I'm hopeful that once we have the recommendations from HMICS, that Scottish Government will consider that in light of those recommendations. Clearly, the budget situation will have a large part to play. There is a medium-term option to continue outsourcing prior to a decision on the long-term sustainable model, and that there is a request for funding to support that additional outsourcing, which is just about to go to Scottish Government, and that's based on the demand that is predicted by Police Scotland with regards to drugs driving analysis requirements for the next financial year. So we have both a medium-term and a long-term option for Scottish Government to consider. I don't anticipate that Government will make a decision on the long-term sustainable model until after HMICS have reported their recommendations.
Great, thanks for that. Caroline, you still have your hand up. Is that a legacy? Okay, well, that's the Forensic Toxicology Oversight Group. And yeah, can I just add also that congratulations to everyone that's been involved in getting Project Weaver over the line, but also in the substantial improvement in the drug driving performance as well. And as I say, we'll have a more direct reporting line to the committee going forward. That was always the intention. Okay, I think that concludes the public part of today's meeting. So